I'm Colby Spencer, and this is Vantropolis. This is Vantropolis, a podcast about the happenings, the goings-on, and the general day-to-day life and antics of the underslept masses working in Vancouver's film industry. I'm no expert. I'm just nosy. And if you are too, let's do this. When it came time to sit down and edit my episode with Vancouver cinematographer Toby Gorman, I didn't. It ended up being such an easy-flowing conversation that I decided to leave it as is and allow it to breathe, as if we were two old friends chatting over tea. We are oldish friends, but there was no tea. Toby hails from the UK, and after literally being thrown into the deep end upon his arrival on the West Coast, he found himself working on shows like Supernatural, The Dead Zone, and X-Men 3. He moved into the lighting department, and now he's a well-respected cinematographer, most recently working on many of the Hallmark films shot in Vancouver and the CW television show Riverdale. We discuss the merits of UK versus Vancouver life, what it's like on set as a DP, and how important family support is when a spouse works in film. And yes, he has a lovely English accent.
And language is
You can
fine.
swear as much as you want.
Yeah, okay.
Just fucking go for it. Toby Gorman, hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How you doing?
I'm really great. Thanks for coming to join me today in my humble little podcast.
No problem.
I just keep suckering people into showing up, which is kind of surreal.
Yeah, well, here I am.
So I wanted to kind of open with hiatus season because it's, mid-May. And I don't think a lot of people know about hiatus in Vancouver film. So a lot of, cast, crew, they're just walking around a bit lost. I see you have a 5 o'clock shadow, Everyone's let themselves go a little bit.
I must say I am a one shave a week guy, so even on set I'd have a 5 o'clock shadow by Wednesday.
Oh, fair enough. Okay. So let's tell everybody what hiatus is because we're right in it. I feel like it's a timely piece to start with.
Yeah, I guess, it's funny with hiatus because I probably have a different relationship to a lot of people because my jobs generally each year are quite different. And so it's hard to identify when a lull might be for everyone else. I know when it's harder to hire people than other times, because no one's available and stuff. And I guess, obviously, I'm not working right now and I am certainly between shows. So it obviously is hiatus season, at least for me and obviously for everyone else. But yeah, I guess it's the time between, when a lot of the big shows wrap and then, there's, 2 or 3 months before they get going again and shoot for 9 months again.
All the big actors go home, right? They go back to the States usually to have some time off.
Yeah, that's right. And certain people...
Couple months, right? 2 months.
That's right. Certain people moan about how it's a rubbish couple of months because it's not, the middle of summer or whatever. But,
right, yeah. It's January in Vancouver when hiatus happens.
Yeah. But no complaints here. I love walking. And I'll walk around in flip-flops probably even in December when I'm not working, just to really know I'm not working.
Well, and you're a hardy Brit, too, which we'll get into as well. But yeah, my husband's obviously in film. You guys go way back. And I was telling you earlier before we started, day 2 or 3 of hiatus for him, he was super excited. He was creative. He's getting outside. He was staying up late watching Netflix shows and going down the rabbit hole of all the documentaries. And then it kind of morphs into sort of like a bit of a lost feeling. And he's doesn't know where the next paycheck's coming from. He applies for unemployment insurance. And then it's almost a slight panic of like, maybe I'll just take something that's lesser and I'll just take a day call on something. So it's funny watching him go from this glee to sort of, and it's every year. I'm like, this happens every year.
Yeah.
We're a bit more poor in May and June, but you're rich in time, right?
Sure.
So anyways, that's hiatus for everybody that kind of doesn't understand that. So if you're creeping shows and trying to find Supernatural and all these guys, they're not here. They're not back until July. So you can go about your regular life.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of wanted to get into sort of how you started in this. You're, just for the record, Toby Gorman is a cinematographer or a director of photography, and we'll get into what that is. But I want to, obviously you're English, and I want to talk about your start in the UK and just sort of how it got you over to Vancouver. So why don't you tell everyone that kind of story?
Sure, here we go, yeah. So I went to university and did an art degree, which ended up being sculpture, which is kind of strange based on what I was doing. But basically, when I was a kid, I was into drawing and painting and stuff, and to me, that's what the art world was all about. And then I went to art school and discovered the real art world, which is lots of confusing objects in galleries that most people don't go to. So I had this real journey of disillusionment and then trying to figure out what I did like and what I didn't like. So basically I did this art degree, and towards the end of it, I started to make more work that was sort of video based and I was doing like sculptures and projecting onto them and things like that. But I always had an issue with the fact that, you know, we're doing these works that, you know, apparently discuss these issues about being a human being, but an incredibly tiny section of society actually goes to art galleries and gets to see these works. And even when they do see them, they don't know what the hell they are a lot of the time. And that's not to say there's not fantastic artworks, of course there are, but there's also
that elite vibe.
Yeah, and there's in art school especially, like 95% of what people are doing is you don't really need to take the time to go and look at, you know, but then there's 5% who's doing great stuff. So anyway, I had a bit of a existential process going on there. And by the time it got to the end of my degree, I was like, what am I doing? And I did a master's just to buy myself some time and to figure out what the hell I was doing with my life. And I approached my master's very differently and decided to not worry about the art world so much and just sort of do what made sense to me more. And I naturally started making more video work, and I was doing like video installations where I'd sort of make short films and that were exploring like the language of cinema and stuff like that people could, you know, walk into a gallery and see this projection and hear sounds and that sort of thing. So by the end of that, I was much more interested in narrative filmmaking, and especially as, to me, film was a way that we could, you know, discuss these life issues or, you know, issues of being a human being in a form that people actually take part in, actually go to the cinema, they watch movies, they watch TV. And so it just seemed like it just made sense as far as an accessible medium that incorporated so many of the art forms, like, you know, fine art, whether it be like sculpture or, you know, and music and photography and everything. So, you know, it's a medium that you know, includes so many of these art forms. But the best thing about it is that people actually want to go and see it. So that made more sense to me. And so by the end of my master's, I was just trying to make sort of narrative projects. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't know anything about photography. I didn't know anything about lighting, that's for sure. Didn't know anything about the film industry, knew nothing. So I sort of went on personal missions to sort of make some shorts, some of which I made, some which never got made, but I learned a lot in the process of not making them. And made a couple. So I entered some sort of short film competitions. One was like the 50 quid film festival, and you had to make a film for 50 quid. So me and a friend made this film about a milkman with his last customer in driving around the streets of London, which we made for 50 quid. And I think out of like, it was like a worldwide competition. I can't remember how many people entered it. Something like 500, and we came second.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's kind of a unique story, that one.
Yeah, it's a 3-minute short. It's to be honest, it's probably still the best short I've made.
Isn't that funny? A lot of people say the early stuff.
Yeah.
They look back and it was kind of pure. Maybe you didn't limit yourself so much or overthink it.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Sure. Absolutely. Like, you're definitely, you know, there's truth to the notion that the more experienced you are, the less you're going to try things. I knew nothing, made a bunch of mistakes, learned from them, but ultimately made a film that I'm quite proud of. So it's 3 minutes, no dialogue, one guy.
Low production.
It was 50 quid, yeah. And then we did another one. I made another one with the same friend, which is similar. It was like a 36-hour contest in London, and we made this. We turned up in the morning so hungover without a clue what we were doing, and we saw all these other film crews running around with like boom mics and cameras that clearly they knew how to make films, and we didn't know what we were doing, and we had one camera and no sound equipment, and we ended up making this really surreal short film, which we loved, and to this day it's probably my favorite screening experience, because at the end of the 36 hours they screen all the movies, and we sat in this theatre with 100 other filmmakers and watched 20 or 30 shorts, and ours was on right towards the end, and all these shorts were like bad. They were like,
But it's sort of renegade film school, right?
Kinda, yeah.
I would love your thoughts on film school in what you're describing, because you essentially were giving yourself that film school. Because
Sure.
I had somebody else on, and they went to VFS, and they were like, there wasn't enough doing and making.
Right.
We made like one thing in the whole time that I was there, instead of making something every day, let's say, and making 100 things, maybe half of them are shit.
Sure.
But that's how you learn.
Yeah,
You don't learn doing one.
No, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, we did that thing, and we came like fourth or something and won some film course. And anyway, so it kind of bolstered our confidence in filmmaking and my confidence as well. But I wanted to move on to like dialogue-driven things, and anyway. So at the time, I'd finished my master's, and with the same friend that I'd made these films with, he was working for a company, and they needed a web designer, and I sort of got led into that world, and I started working as a web designer, which is how I was paying my rent for the first bunch of years, whilst trying to make these little short films. And I never assumed that I'd ever work in the film industry. It was like this big alien.
That's what so many people say.
Yeah, and I thought I'll never meet someone to get a job there. I'll have to just make my own little films. And anyway, this friend of mine, he was moving to Vancouver with his company. I'd since left, and I was working for a cell phone company doing cell phone graphics. It would be a great job if you wanted to do that. It was like, a big cell phone company, and it was the cutting edge of, cell phone internet. And
was it Vodafone?
It was O2.
O2. I lived in London for a while. I remember Vodafone distinctly.
Yeah. There's four of them or something. The big four, and
my sad little pay-as-you-go phone.
Right. Yeah. But I hated that. I hated working in an office. I hated. Hate's a strong word, but it's the correct word actually. I was going to kill people.
But a lot of film people say that. Like my brother was on too, and you just can't. He can't function in a regular quote unquote job.
Yeah.
A lot of misfits find film. Right?
I would spend my entire time, in any job I had, reading the internet about how to make films, how to shoot with cameras, how to record sound, how to edit. So I would sit there, and any job I did, and maybe some people work really hard in offices, but it's amazing how much time people seem to waste.
Have you not seen the BBC show The Office?
Yes.
Nobody was working.
Fair enough, because basically I could fit my work into like 20, 30 minutes of the day. So I'd spread that out.
I think many people could, but don't tell the bosses that.
Well, this is it. And so I'd spread that out, and in the meantime be doing my own research and writing scripts and stuff.
Did you think about going to film school, or you couldn't afford it? Or?
Well, I'd done so much.
It sounds like you were already wanting to go that way.
Well, maybe. I think I probably did Google a few film schools and stuff at the time, but I never really thought about it that seriously, and I'd just done a big bunch of education, so I wasn't really into...
Go back to school again.
Yeah, not at that time. Anyway, trying to not keep a long story too long, but this friend of mine who I'd been making the films with, he moved to Vancouver with his job, and he was like, come to Vancouver, it's great, and I hated mine so much, my job so much that... and I looked into getting a year's visa, and it was like a 6-week process. I applied for that, got it, handed in my notice, and was like, awesome, I'm off to Vancouver. Knew nothing about Vancouver.
What year was that?
2005.
Okay.
And I knew zero about Vancouver. Didn't know there was a film industry, didn't know anything. Brought my camera, my PAL, standard definition camera that doesn't even work in North America.
Going down the gangway to get on the plane.
Yeah, that's it. Wide-eyed and like, woohoo, new adventure, which is amazing. I recommend to anyone who hates their job, leave it and pursue something you want to do. If anyone I'm ever talking to is like, I hate my job, I'd say leave it. And I know we've all got considerations to keep in mind, but anyway, I left it, and it was amazing. And I went to Vancouver, and I'd saved a bit of money, so when I came to Vancouver...
Plus it was pounds, so it was basically like double.
And it was at a time when it was like $2.35 to the pound. So I felt like I was rich, and I didn't need to work. And so I just carried on trying to make these films, but in Vancouver. And we were all like, yeah, we just won these, or nearly won these 2 film competitions. We can show these guys how to do it. And boy, did we get our asses handed to us. Like, Vancouver was a filmmaking city, and we entered some competitions, and it was like, oh my God, talk about being blown away by every one of the competition.
And that's so funny, because I don't even think in '05 it was like at the level, obviously, that it is now. We were still sort of adolescents. Like, it was getting really busy, but you look at it now, I still think we were pretty proud of ourselves back then.
Sure.
When big actors came and, big movie shooting downtown. You know, we still had that sort of like awe about it?
Sure, I guess so. I mean, for me, it was also new that I didn't have any context. I didn't know,
right?
So ultimately, we made another, a couple of films with our, in these short film contests. There's millions of them in Vancouver. Great fun, great way of learning, and a great excuse to do something.
It is a great excuse. I agree.
Yeah,
It
when you know
forces
you've
you to
only
actually-
got and I've done some stuff that I'm quite proud of. I've done some terrible stuff as well, but
Most people would never start otherwise, right? It kind of forces you to just go do it.
And you know that within 48 hours you're going to end up with something. You know,
so you're not precious about it.
Yeah, and you sort of take that into consideration and sort of go for it. And so, a lot of things to be said for those.
And just on that point, I think a lot of people think that those competitions are full of experts. Like, all these people must know what they're doing. Like, to your point, no. Often you just have a passion and enough will to say, I'm going to try this.
I mean, there'd always be those films where, they had obviously some guy or, to shoot it that...
Dad was a producer.
Yeah, where you're like, wow, look at that. And, and that was in the days as well where, like, nowadays, like, digital cameras are amazing. And this is in the days where they were terrible.
Yes.
So it's still when people were shooting film and digital was just a terrible option, but most of the time you have to shoot on these, But anyway, we did one of these, and one of the actors that we managed to rope in, who we'd met a bunch of actors down the pub one day, and they were like, "Oh, come and be in our film this weekend," and they looked at one of our other films and thought it'd be a good idea for some reason.
It's surprising how many people say yes if you just ask them, in the city especially.
Yeah, so we made probably the worst film I've ever made that particular weekend. But the one of the actors, her boyfriend was like the third AD on Smallville or something, and I was like, "Oh, I want to work in film. Can you give him my number?" Again, I knew nothing about film, nothing about the departments, nothing about anything.
Good for you, though.
And then like a week or two later, I get a phone call from someone else saying, "I got your number from someone."
It literally sometimes just comes down to that.
Yeah,
like I got your number from someone.
Exactly. It wasn't who I gave my number to. It's somebody.
You didn't
totally
even have
random.
a resume.
No, I had nothing. And so this person called and said, "Can you work tomorrow?" And I was like, "Sure. What have I got to do?" And they said, "Well, just show up at 5 a.m. I think it was in North Vancouver."
You know how many film stories start like that? Like just show up tomorrow at this place at this time. It's like a drug deal, and you're like, all right.
Yeah, and this was like, talk about an eye-opening moment. This isn't a terrible story, I guess, because but anyway, so I show up in North Vancouver at 5 a.m. and I guess and I'm a PA. I didn't even know what a PA is. I didn't even know that I was a PA. All I know is that I was showing up. No one had said, "Can you come in and PA?" I didn't know what PA was, even if they'd asked me that. So I just showed up. I could be touching cameras, lights, like
you were game,
nothing.
though.
I was game. I had no idea. So I show up and the ALM, who I guess he was, didn't even know that at the time, said, "Yeah, you just got to stand here and watch this line of pylons until the trucks show up." And I'm like, okay, so there's a stretch of road with a bunch of pylons and nothing. And I stand there on my feet for like an hour and a half, nothing's coming along. And then eventually the trucks start showing up. And it was just like, what the fuck? Like, because truck after truck after truck after truck. And I was like, what is going on? I didn't think it was like this. I thought it was like a truck or two and a couple of,
It's like Beyonce's concert coming to town?
Sure, yeah, it was insane. And so I watched all this happen, and I'm like, okay. And then I think one of the next people I met was your husband, Tony Dirk.
Right.
And I guess he'd been doing it for a little while longer then. I remember saying to him, "Treat me like an idiot. I've got no idea what I'm doing." And he's like, "Treat me like an idiot. Don't be silly. Here's your radio." And I'm like, "Great. How do I use this?"
You're like, "No, I don't think you heard me. I don't think you heard me."
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, all right.
I know I sound
see."
quaint and British, Yeah. I really meant it. But he would be the most lovely person to teach, right?
Fantastic. Well,
Because sometimes people are just dicks.
Yeah,
They're
and
like,
at
just
that
fucking
time,
figured out, I don't have time for you.
Yeah.
Why are you even here? Right? Like, I've heard of horror stories.
Yeah. I experienced some horror stories, like, and Tony was great, obviously, he fully gave me the lay of the land, and
He's just as patient with me.
That's good. So I ended up PAing on the Dead Zone for like about a month and a half, and that was basically my my film school as far as how a production can be, because that's where I sort of start to get an understanding of, there's different departments and different unions,
right?
And you don't touch other departments' stuff, and you do your job, and
there's like a law of the land.
Yeah, totally. And so it was great for that. And then one day, Jay Rathor, another friend of Tony's, and so there's, the three of us were all PAing. And one day...
Which is production assistant, just as a reminder for anybody that didn't listen to my other episodes. And it's sort of like, I don't want to say the lowest of the low, but it would be very entry level. You're meant to kind of manage crowds, sweep stuff up, do menial sort of film gophering, let's say.
And like, I think Tony said in his podcast that it was a license for all the crew to treat you like crap, and there's a lot of truth in that. But then the crew that don't, you remember those guys,
right? You always remember the nice people.
Yeah. one day Jay called me up and said, I've just been talking to this lamp op at Crafty. He tells me that we've got to go to the union now and sign up because it's so busy they're taking people off the street. And it's like, okay, great. So me and Jay read this book over the weekend, the lighting handbook, both
winging a prayer.
Winging a prayer. We went in the following morning to the union. Gave them our resumes, of which we had made up the majority of it. And I shouldn't be saying all of this.
Well, you know what? When it's that busy, though, to be honest, you don't even need a resume.
Yeah, and I say made
I've
up.
had friends in construction just move to carpentry because the halls. So for a hall, for everyone that doesn't know, like the union, they consider the union hall, let's say, there's a list of people in the union in order of sort of seniority, right? So if there's 1,000 people in lighting, let's say, and you've been in it 15, 20 years, you might be in the top 100.
Yeah, I think they've abolished seniority now, though.
Oh, have they? Okay.
Which is good.
It is good.
Yeah, because you'd get a lot of old schoolers that didn't want to work and didn't have to because they're at the top of the list.
And that's a whole union discussion, which we don't have enough time for today. But yeah, so when it's empty and there's no one on that list, then they go to like permittees, which are people that are basically in the waiting room.
Exactly, and that's
saying,
what we became.
Me, please. Yeah. Please, sir, can I have a job? That's my horrible English accent.
That was pretty good. But yeah, that's essentially what we became. I think we may have even been, I think there's one lower than permittee, which is like the reserve permittee list or something. But anyway, so we both sat this test, went home, and then that night both got calls. Can you work on X-Men or Dead Zone or whatever? And so we're straight into the lighting pool.
And that was X-Men, the feature film.
X-Men 3 at the time.
So that must have been pretty crazy for you because you wouldn't have known what Dead Zone is, and that was a television series that ran quite a while here. Mm-hmm. Was that Anthony Michael Hall?
He was, and he was he was a great guy. Like
everyone says, Tony says amazing stories about him too.
On my very first day, that as a PA, that day I was just talking about, I managed to get close to set, and he's walking by, and he says, "Oh, hi, we haven't met. I'm Michael." I said, "Oh, hi, Toby." Every day from then on, without fail, morning, Toby. Like, I was a PA. So talk about remembering the guys that don't treat the PAs like crap.
Just class.
Yeah, so,
He's lovely. Tony says he's lovely, too. Yeah. And that was a great show for everybody. It ran quite a while.
I think it was like 7 seasons or something. We joined, I joined in the last season, but...
Sorry, I interrupted you. But X-Men, like this is big stuff. You like come over here, you're sort of
it was
letting
like,
trucks in, and the next day you're hanging out on X-Men.
Yeah, like talk about baptism of fire for sure. And with the lighting thing, like so both me and Jay found out 3 months later we both failed the test. But by then we've been working.
I
would
have been really shocked if you had passed. Like, how hard is this test?
Yeah, but by the time they told us, we were like, okay, well we've been working for 3 months, so we'll ace it now.
Because I think if you fail it, you have 3 months, right? Or
I can't remember. I think you just got to keep taking it, and I think
there is a time in between
busy,
that. Yeah, and you're right. If it's busy, all
you probably
off,
have to wait before you can take it again.
Because Tony did art department, same thing. He failed a couple times.
Right. Okay.
And then finally got in.
Right. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Sure. Sure. Well, when it's quiet, it's really hard to get the days.
Yes.
And then. One other story, I guess, as far as my beginning. So my first day in the lighting department, my first call was Supernatural, season 1.
Season 1?
Season 1.
Oh, my goodness. That is a throwback.
Yeah. And I literally didn't know, like, one end of a light from another. I didn't know what AC is. Now, AC is just, cable. It's just
like power
cable. Yeah. But they don't call it that in England, and I didn't know anything. And I remember, so I showed up in a second unit, and there's a second unit gaffer who I won't mention her name. And she wasn't very nice. And I remember saying, go and get some AC. And I was like,
air conditioning?
Yeah. She's like, are you serious? And I was like, and I was like, oh, AC, right, yeah, of course. And she was
Google.
Yeah, and she was being real bitch. And then at one point she was like, can you go and get me a pepper and a 300? And I thought, oh, I know what those lights are, great. So I ran off and I got my pepper, got my 300 and put them on the sticks and the stands. And I ran back into her and I was like, okay, here we are. And she was like, they're upside down. I was like, yeah. And then she said, you know what? I'm better off on my own. Go to main unit. I'm not dealing with this. And I was like, oh my God, I just want to be a PA again.
Yeah.
So they sent me to main unit and show up at main unit and they're like, oh, what happened? Why are you over here? And I was like, well, such and such wasn't a big fan of me, and she told me to come over here. And she was like, and the gaffer was like, oh, she's a bitch, don't worry about it. And he was like, don't stick your tongue in any light sockets, and you're going to be good to go. Yeah. And so, anyway, from then on, it got better, and then it was a real, like a summer of, as I say, a baptism of fire.
Now you're in lighting.
Now we're in lighting,
wow.
Learning as much as possible, and I loved it. I really was so grateful for the opportunity that I just didn't care. I remember working on Smallville, and I didn't even even have rain gear, and it was like pissing rain on the
You
farm.
were English and you didn't have any rain gear, Toby Gorman?
Yeah, rain gear is a Vancouver thing, despite the English thing.
It is, you're right.
And people were asking me, "You haven't got rain gear?" And I went, "No." But I was so glad to be there, and I didn't care. And I was soaked. I had like this big jacket.
I'm just envisioning you just like full of glee, just absolutely drenched.
running around, getting yelled at, making mistakes.
But you're very
loving it.
good-natured.
I tried to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and that was a time where there's some real dicks.
Absolutely.
And they would.
It can absolutely be the Wild West, and people move up so high in film, and you're like, how the hell did they get that high?
Yeah.
Because they're psychotic.
Totally, and you're like, this is not productive.
And I don't know if it's the same in all industries. I feel like film and maybe they've tightened it a bit up these days. I don't know. But it's a bit rogue. There's some rogue shit going on.
Yeah.
And I don't mean in terms of safety. I mean in terms of people's power and
Sure.
and like that, just the way things are done.
Yeah, I'd like to think that things have improved, especially, more so in the last few years, especially. So I'd like to think that things have improved. But when I'd look back...
I would say it has. There's more checks and balances. And more about safety and living healthier. And that comes up a lot in a couple other episodes. Less drugs.
Yep.
All that.
Yep.
It's not as accepted. That glory party kind of...
Sure.
cocaine, all of that stuff in the early parts of Vancouver film was rampant.
Yeah, now it doesn't go down so well, it seems.
You would be an outlier for sure.
Yeah, you'd be gone.
Yeah.
Which is good. And same for the way you treat people. People are much more used to filing complaints and things that actually will
I would say
happen
the
about
union's
it.
done a better job now of really being involved in that.
Sure.
In the past maybe 5 years.
Sure. Yeah.
People feel more just safe to go, especially with the whole Me Too movement too.
Exactly.
I think there's way more boots on the ground now with that.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Totally. And
it's
I think
long overdue.
Yeah, and a lot of these big companies like Warner Brothers and stuff, they don't want any of this stuff on their, so they nip it in the bud. And,
which is great.
Which is great. Yeah. So it feels like a,
But back then,
back then it wasn't
Toby
quite
was
like
being screamed at.
Yeah, completely.
So you're like in the midst of these big shows. Where are you living?
So I was living downtown Vancouver. I was like 27 years old. My rent was $600 a month, and so I could work 2 days and pay my rent. Work 3 days and my month was covered.
What did you think of the city?
I loved it. Like I said, I left a job I hated. I was kind of done with London. London's amazing in the right context when you live in the right place. But I was done with it, and
I
so
feel
it
like
was
you
amazing.
need money to live in London.
You do need money, and you need money to live in Vancouver now.
It's true. You're right.
But back then, it felt like I had no responsibilities, and it felt like I just didn't need to do a lot.
But I think because it's more urban in London, you really want a better quality of life. You're not around as much tree and greenery, so you need to be in a nicer neighborhood.
Yeah.
Where there's more like Holland Park or Chelsea, where there's just a bit more of that quality of life in the city.
Yeah,
or in Vancouver, you can get to that pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, exactly. Vancouver is just there. Generally where you live is nice, right? And that's why, and that's one of the things I fell in love with, which is why I'm still living in an expensive area, because I don't want to move out, but affording it's hard. But anyway, that's basically what I was doing. And so I was working in lighting, and I was shooting anything and everything I possibly could. I forget when I really started shooting shorts for other people, but I guess because basically what happened and it was quite a significant thing to happen for me was that, so I had this year's work permit and it expired. So I was in the middle of doing all this amazing work, working on X-Men and blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, done. Can't work in Canada anymore. Can't renew it. Can't do anything. So that was
But it's the Commonwealth, for God's sakes.
Oh, I know.
Did you call the Queen?
The amount of times I've heard that, and I'm like, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't seem to mean anything.
It means something to Buckingham Palace. That's about it.
Yeah, the Queen's on this money, which...
she enjoys it.
Yeah. So that happened. So I couldn't work anymore. Now, I'd still had some of my web design contacts, and so I was able to stay on in Canada as a tourist. And I'm sure, the authorities wouldn't be happy about this, but anyway, I was able to make ends meet by doing remote web design, for English companies.
I feel like the statute of limitations on that is probably passed.
And like I couldn't be taxed on what I was
say
making.
good luck, Revenue Canada.
Yeah, and
good luck.
And like I said, I needed like $1,000 max to pay my way in those days. So
that's a nice thing when you don't need much to get by when you're younger, right?
That's it. And so I'd do a couple of web design projects and I'd be done for the month. So I was able to stay as a tourist and. But not work in film, and so that basically pushed me into the indie world a lot more. Like I was, I started shooting shorts for other people. Some idiot called me up who I'd been lamping on something, and he was like, "Do you DP?" And I was like, "Yeah, I DP." And he's like, "Great, can you shoot our short this week?" And I'm like, "Yeah, totally." I didn't DP other than shooting my own things,
Yeah, but the nice thing with indies and these side projects is you can jump 3 categories.
Yeah, exactly. And they needed someone.
Somebody has to do it.
Yeah. So, I did that. And at the same time, this is, I say, people were still shooting film, and I really wanted to show that, I really wanted to get hired as a DP in whatever level. So I decided to make a short on film, which I directed and shot, and learnt a lot from that. That was on 16mm.
So that's interesting that you kind of were in lighting, but you knew now you wanted to sort of evolve. Like that shift of, you were in the electrics department.
Yeah.
Or lighting.
I mean, I guess I'm probably one of those millions of people that initially just wanted to direct. I wanted to write and direct my own
You're right.
stuff.
Everyone says that.
Yeah.
So many even people that have come in here.
But then but for me, I'd got to get to set, and I didn't really know what a DP was. And I had actually, for one of these films I didn't make in England, I had actually hired a DP. So I must have known enough to have done that. But I didn't really know what they did and how the role of the director and the role of the DP, where those lines were.
Well, let's get into that right now. That's
Sure.
a great segue, because I have that written down in my notes that nobody does know what a cinematographer or director of photography, which is the same term, or two terms for the same person. What do they do? It's funny how everybody knows what the director does.
Yeah, but you know what?
And I would even argue they don't really know what they do.
Exactly. They
just
think
know
the director
role.
does more.
Yeah.
So
let's just explain everybody in a rudimentary way.
Okay, I'll try.
What those two things are and why they're different, but how they work together.
Sure. So a director obviously is, I'll make the distinction at first though between, say, film and TV, because with TV, I'll get to that, I guess. But let's talk about film specifically at first, because with an individual film, whether it's like a 90-minute TV movie or a feature film or whatever, the director obviously is the most important person, and they ultimately work with all the departments. So with the production designer, with the cinematographer, with wardrobe, everything in prep. And they're basically developing the script, working out where they're going to shoot it. So they're working with all these departments and giving all these sort of instruction and a place to spring from for all these different departments. And they're ultimately responsible for all that, for the direction that everything's going to go in and what they ultimately want to end up with. They're not doing those jobs, but they know that they want, they might say that they want this certain, a certain look from the wardrobe or the sets.
They're like translating that vision
across
the department heads.
Sure, and so the props person might be like, okay, great, and they run off and get they know what props
like
they
you
need.
did with the light. You're like, look what I've got this.
Yeah.
This old bookcase. No?
Yeah,
okay.
That bookcase is upside down. So the director obviously is the sort of governor of the project and makes all those creative decisions. Now, a cinematographer is one of these people that the director's collaborating with, and a cinematographer is basically in charge of the camera and the lighting and everything to do with that. So there might be selecting the particular camera that you're using, the lenses that you're using, any special equipment that you might need, and you're and with the director you work out a visual style and a visual language that you want to approach the project with, then you, depending on the locations, you work out, the lighting that you need, and in prep you're always, dealing with a schedule and when you're going to shoot what and how much time you need to do certain things, and
the mood,
and the mood and the tone, and also how a director likes to shoot. Like every director is different, and some are very technical, and they'll know exactly what focal length lens they want to be on, because
maybe they come from camera,
and maybe they just know because they've been doing it long enough. Other directors may not have a clue, and be like, just sort of describe.
They're more directing the people.
Yeah, and they might describe the visuals in more abstract terms that you then interpret, and then there's everything in between. So I feel like I'm randomly going around.
No, that's good. I think that's a great start. And I also wanted to ask you, a lot of directors and DPs or cinematographers pair up and stay together. It's like a marriage of sorts, because you really work well together. Yeah. Like I always think of the Coen brothers films.
Sure.
Which have a very great, interesting look. And Roger Deakins, I think, is the DP for most of them.
That's right.
And he's like the only cinematographer I really know, because I see his stuff and I'm like in love with his work.
Yeah, he's my favorite cinematographer. Yeah.
Sicario he did, which, I mean, you can look at that film on silent and just watch it. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and
it's a real art of like not being afraid of just having someone's silhouette.
Sure.
Right? Of
Yeah.
like bold things that you don't think are bold until you watch like shitty American dramas and you go, oh my God, it's just one light, or you don't even think about it until you see like a true artist.
Sure, and Roger Deakins is that. He's always been my favorite cinematographer. He's a true master of what he does.
He really
and,
is.
I'm a big fan, and I've studied his
And
work.
I'm not even knowledgeable about it, but you just know.
Yeah, that's
when you look at
interesting
it.
to know.
I think he did Blade Runner too, the new one, 2049.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I mean, they're just mind blowing. There's such an art to that.
It's true, but at the same time, it's also naturally motivated. It's not like it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like he's done much. It just looks fantastic, and he's just got this toolkit of
it's just his paintbrush that he's put on the film, right?
Yeah, he's obviously one of the best cinematographers in the world.
And I don't think he's ever won an Oscar.
He won for Blade Runner finally.
Okay.
But it was his like 14th nomination.
That was a dry spell, and it just like obscene how long it took.
Yeah. I mean, I never put too much on that. It's like Scorsese didn't win forever, did he? And then he won for Departed, which we wouldn't say is better than Goodfellas, but
no.
So whatever. I know they tip the hat eventually.
Right. Getting up there, Deakins. Better give you something. So I think that's like a great way to describe it. The director and the cinematographer, this pairing. I just wanted to clarify that for people because it doesn't get enough justice, I don't think.
Sure,
I'm understanding.
And there's directors that I've worked with a lot, in the same sort of. Well, I wouldn't describe it as Coen Brothers Deakins, but there's definitely directors that I've worked with a lot, and they always try and work with the same people if they enjoy working with them, and that you have a shorthand, and that because sometimes because directors and DPs can fight. There's plenty of directors that I'm not going to work with that person again. Because creatively you could just be at other ends of
you have to have synergy.
Yeah, that's right.
Because they are so codependent in a way.
Yeah.
Right.
They are, and so many things of what I do and that I try and push for does have to ultimately be director driven, because you can't. I might say I want to cover a scene in a certain way, but unless the director's behind it, you can't. It's not necessarily going to work, because they've got to. They're managing that whole process ultimately,
or capturing a certain emotion on a certain angle of the actor. And what you want might not work visually. It might be beautiful, but it might not be what they want to portray, right?
Yeah. I mean, this sounds really arty and wanky, but I always try and be a filmmaker before a cinematographer. I hate the idea of saying no to a director. I hate the idea of the photography stopping the film being as good as it can be, just for the sake of a pretty image,
Yeah.
And it's easy to do that. You're like, oh no, I don't want to have to, shoot from this angle, but, it's got to weigh everything up, and if it makes the film better, most people aren't going to know that it kills you.
It's very collaborative, right? A film set is very collaborative.
Immensely collaborative, like the most collaborative thing that I can think of. And I'm sure there's many other things, but
so I took you off your main kind of story that you were going on, so I'm going to bring it back.
Okay.
But you started kind of doing cinematography on some indies.
Yeah.
Right? So that was your foray out of lighting and sort of into that world.
And it pushed me, like, not being able to work in union land, it pushed me, into indies. And so I was just doing anything and everything, like freebies. Like, I've done so many freebies.
That is the recurring theme.
Yeah. And
for film careers.
And it's a an interesting subject, because there's obviously a line. People shouldn't take advantage of you, and they do. Like there's certain producers. I remember there's one that her thing would be $50 a day for as a per diem, or not per diem, but as a honorarium for the crew. That never changed. Like 2 years later, I'm like, no, I'm not doing it anymore. It was fine when it was that little short, but now this is a feature film, and I cannot do it for $50 a day. What are you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
But so it's difficult because, but at the same time, there is a point where, like, I was learning so much. I wanted to shoot these things. I didn't, if someone has something to shoot, I wanted to be doing it. I didn't care if I was getting paid or not.
And if you had the time and freedom, I say go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a time when I did, so I don't regret any of those things. And then obviously there's a point where you have to start fighting for what you're worth when the project has the money for it. But so often, there's people like me and Jay and Tony that want to make a movie and I haven't got any money, but it's a genuine passion project, and you don't want to be like, oh no, you've got to find my
Yes. Well, and sometimes it comes back in spades. Tony's worked on a couple where he was production designing, and like he jokes, I'd have no chance of doing that in the union till I'm like 60 or something.
Right.
And then it goes on to win like multiple film festivals, and they're promoting the hell out of it, and it's like, thank God you put your all into it.
Yeah.
Even though literally for some of those indies, we were like scraping by on paychecks.
Sure.
But I fully supported him because I said, you know what, this is important. Mm-hmm. I get that it's important, and it's not about the money.
that's really good
right?
and brave at this time of life as well, because this was at a time when I didn't have, I wasn't married with kids, and so
Yeah,
it
it's
was
a
easier
sacrifice. It
yeah,
is, but
yeah,
that's part of your creative journey.
yeah, for sure.
It doesn't just come while you're sitting on your ass watching TV.
No, and so like I said, I just shoot everything. Like, and if there's anything I was to say to people who want to, shoot, is just shoot everything you possibly can if you can. But again, you always have to bear in mind where that line is with, being taken advantage of. If it genuinely is worth it for you, do it. And if you're not being exploited and you're not like creating a situation that people think is normal, and screwing over the next guy who needs to get paid, So
And sometimes it's one person you meet from that show that springboards you, like you say, a phone call into the next. You make one
100%.
impression,
100%.
and that woman or man is like, hey, I have something else.
Yeah. If I had a good enough memory, I'm sure I could chart that exact phone call between every single project, however small it was. However, there was always something.
Just
where,
that string that goes through.
Like that first guy that called me up to say, "Hey, do you DP?" I think I'd been lamping for free on some short that he was on as well.
You could have said no. But
yeah,
you didn't.
Yeah. But it was that call from working as a freebie lamp op that gave me the opportunity to actually shoot something, and all the time you're shooting stuff, you're putting it on a reel, and the reel, my first reels were terrible, but you slowly improve them as you get new footage, and so for a while there, my whole thing was, if I get one shot for a reel, it's worth it.
Yes.
And so learning as much as possible. And like I said, importantly for me, I think, was I wasn't able to work in the union, so it pushed me to do all these things, which is really good. Now, so I tried to make it work, just to continue my life story here. I wouldn't go on for that
This
long.
is why we're here. Don't apologize for explaining it. Otherwise, it would just be me talking to myself. It'd be the worst podcast ever. So British. Very British problems. How do I talk about myself?
Yeah.
Without talking about myself.
But so after a while of trying to make it work as a tourist in Vancouver, I realised this is stupid. I can't live like this. I had no medical coverage of any sort. No, I was fully, under the radar, and I was like, this is stupid. I can't do this. So I just bit the bullet and said, right, I've got to move back to England. So moved back to England. I was so unhappy about this.
And what year was that?
This was 2007.
Okay.
And I got a job through a friend of mine that I used to work with at the cell phone company, O2, who was at the BBC, and he just happened to call me, and I've been back a week, broke, homeless, didn't know what I was going to do,
dejected,
depressed, just wanted to be in Vancouver making films, and he called and he was like, "I'm working at the BBC in their cell phone thing. There's a job going. Do you want it?" And I was like, no. I don't do
You're like,
that
how I said
anymore.
yes in Vancouver? I say no in England.
I was like, no, I don't do that anymore. I'm not interested. Hung up. And then about 5 seconds later, I'm thinking, what am I talking about? I'm broke, homeless. I have no idea what I'm doing.
And what's funny? When I moved to England, like in 2000 or 99, I wanted to work at the BBC. So how ironic.
Sure.
That was like the creme de la creme of going to the UK and being like, I want to work at the BBC.
Yeah. Well, because it was the cell phone thing, and it was video content that.
But I hear you. It's no X-Men.
No. And so, but I called him back. I was like, you know what? Yes, of course I want the job. Yes, please. So I got the job at the BBC. Which again was working in an office doing cell phone stuff, and guess what? I fucking hated it. And guess what? I wasn't doing any work. I'd do my work in the half hour that I needed, spread it out, and the rest of the time I was.
So basically, England was a learning sabbatical.
At
desks.
Well, kind of. So that was like a 3-month contract. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to get a place to live until I have somewhere to work. And so I got this job, and then I got, I found a place to live, and it was like £750 a month. And it was sharing a house with 3 other guys that I didn't know, and I had this tiny bedroom, and it was just big enough for a double bed. I couldn't walk around the bed, and it was in Shepherd's Bush, and I was just like depressed. It was like shit. And anyway, that was only a 2-month thing. It's a total digression now, but you mentioned Holland Park earlier, so I have to bring it up again. And then that was a 2-month thing that I was staying in that place, and then I had to move. And the BBC had this internal classifieds ads thing, and so I went on that little site, and this place came up, and it said £600 a month, Holland Park. And I thought, that can't be true. It must be a week. That's ridiculous. But I called them up, and they were like, we were surprised to get a call. We only put the ad on like 5 minutes ago. And I was like, okay, anyway. Went straight down there, and there was this old lady who must have been like 95. lived in this house in Holland Park, right opposite Holland Park Tube Station. For those that don't know, Holland Park is the pimp daddy of all areas. It's right next to, Holland Park. It's
like Shaughnessy.
Hyde Park. It's,
Green, lush.
Yeah.
Celebrities
insane.
live
like
there.
Richard Branson's there around the corner. And but she was like, let's say, she was old. She didn't like going upstairs anymore. And upstairs was basically a fully furnished apartment. I had a huge bedroom which you could fit like 6 double beds in.
Is this the start to Sherlock Holmes?
Maybe. I had a living room of the same size, kitchen and bathroom, and I was like, so £600 a month, and I was like, okay, I'll take it.
She was probably like, I'm gonna go really high.
Yeah, they didn't realize.
She didn't realize.
And people come around and be like, shut up.
Yeah.
This is not where you're living.
Do you have a drug lab in the basement? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it was like the universe saying, you can be here. Here you go. Have this amazing place for not very much money.
Well, and it was on 5 minutes. I totally believe in that stuff. Synchronicity.
Yeah, sure. And so it was amazing. And I loved living there. And like I say,
hello.
I could walk, if I had, and I was, so I was always trying to still hustle for short films or whatever jobs I could get. And anyway, ultimately what I did in that period, again, I thought, with all my experience in lighting, I'll go back to England and I'll work in lighting on big features like James Bond and stuff. But no, it turns out you need to be a certified electrician to work in the lighting department.
So a little higher standards over there in the UK.
And it was gonna be
doing
like
it the right
6
way.
months, and I was like, oh man, I can't do that. So that pushed me more again into
a certified electrician. That's nuts.
It was something like a 6-month apprenticeship. Or like a £4,000 lighting course or electrics course.
Wow.
Which neither of those were appealing or possible. So again, that just pushed me into shooting indies, trying to find little indies and shorts and meeting people that were like that. And so ultimately, I ended up being at the BBC, I think, for 6 months in the end. And basically, I was starting to get other jobs, like shooting little commercials for like terrible companies and anything I could take, like I say, and continuing to build a reel, and I've got to say that working in England, like working with like European cinematographers, like I'd still work in lighting, I'd still like be a gaffer for like one of the most important collaborations was working with this cinematographer called Bet Rurich, she's a Spanish cinematographer, and her work's beautiful. And when she needed a gaffer, and I forget, I was on some website, so you can find these jobs, and I was looking at her work, saying, "Wow, this is amazing!" And anyway, and it was a real working with her was one of those light bulb moments where it's like, "Wow!" I thought I knew how to light from working in Canada, but shit, this is actual
next
good
level
lighting. And so I learned loads from her, and I only did this short for a week, had a great time, and I still bring her up, 12 years later.
Well, everybody has those sort of light bulb, or even just a mentor that they never forget.
So I was very grateful for my time in England, because that really helped me develop as a cinematographer. And again, I shot a million freebies. I shot my first, officially would have been my first feature film, which was, the budget was £20,000, which is about 30,000.
It's about
Canadian.
70 million in Canadian dollar.
No, it's barely anything. I think I was getting like £400 a week or something. Like it was.
I still think I know Hollywood blockbusters, but I just budget doesn't make a good story.
It's very true.
You can't hide behind a shitty story.
No, you're right.
And I would say European cinema, Stephen Merchant or somebody said, it would be so great if we had American budgets with European stories.
Sure. I totally agree with that. With this particular project, it was also a shitty story, as well as a shitty budget.
Never mind.
And everything was shitty about it. Again, learned so much.
Except your education on it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that if you look at my IMDb, I think the trailer for this still comes up, and if I could remove anything from my history, it would be that.
Yeah.
But
it'll keep you humble when you're like a Hollywood star cinematographer.
Sure. Yeah. But again, learned so much, and ultimately, eventually, and then I left the BBC and I was just working freelance, shooting these little commercials and whatnot. Met my wife during that time. I was shooting for this Indian producer who did, as I say, terrible commercials, and he told me to show up one day. He said, just show up on Sunday at this address at 1:30 in the afternoon. And I
You're
was
like, I've done this before.
And what is it? What is it I'm shooting? And he was like,
Are there going to be pylons there?
Oh yeah, right, exactly, yeah. And he was like, "I'll just show up." I was like, "What was the project?" He's like, "Just show up at 1:30." And I was like, "Oh, what is this?" So I show up on a Sunday at 1:30. Last thing I wanted to be doing, and it was the Bangladesh Catering Association Awards, which is like the Oscars for for Bangladeshi catering, I guess. And I had to shoot behind the scenes interviews with like the people who'd won, and my future wife was the one asking the questions. And
amazing.
So there's a few stories from that, but yeah, ultimately that's how we met. And then anyway, after that, my residency came through because I'd applied. I forgot to mention that. I'd applied for permanent residency. So in 2009, my residency came through and I could move back to Canada. And so I did just that.
And she was game?
She was game. It was kind of a few stepping stones to bringing her over. I brought her over to Vancouver in August, and we stayed in English Bay for 3 weeks.
English Bay, very fitting.
Exactly.
So starter with the English
yes,
stuff.
Stunning weather every day, beach life. Yeah, this is Vancouver all the time, honey.
You should always come visit Vancouver in the summer and make your decisions.
Yeah, I didn't mention that summer part. It just made it look as if it was like that the whole
because
time.
then for the other 10 months, you're like, but we have June and July and August. Not even June. We have July and a bit of August.
Yeah. And I think even when I came back, I thought I'll start working in the union again, but it wasn't as busy as when I left, and so I couldn't get any of those union days. I was still a permittee, and I couldn't get any of those jobs. So I would be lamping on like movies of the week for like a pittance, and basically making ends meet with that. And
movies of the week are that's a whole other world.
It is, yeah.
They're all those names like Confined.
Yes,
and
exactly.
like
That was one of them,
the Stepmother Next Door.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, they're sort of like, you could swap a few words around and come up with another title. Like, they're not very inventive.
You could make like a movie of the week title generator.
Absolutely, I think they do.
Just throw 8 in and...
Yeah, it's amazingly vague, yeah. So I was doing that whilst trying to, obviously still shooting everything for free and trying to shoot anything I could and get paid. And basically what ended up happening was over a period of time, I was able to work in lighting less and be shooting more. And at some point, I guess I stopped working in lighting, which probably wasn't even that long ago. And then basically my projects have slowly got better and better.
They sure have.
My first.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, my first real break was getting the Indian movie, Punjabi film Mirza, which was a feature. Which is a feature, and so I ended up shooting 3 Indian movies, and it was kind of bizarre because they're very different animals. Like the way they spend their money is completely different. And they're able to get an immense amount for the money that they spend.
Do we still have as many of those here? I feel like that was like a season where all those Bollywood and kind of Indian movies came. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think
maybe
a lot
it's too expensive now.
There's trends within Indian cinema as well. Like
right.
So, seeing Vancouver was definitely a thing for a while, and I was
now.
working. There's an important distinction, I guess, between Bollywood, which is your Hindi movies, and that's your big industry that everyone knows of, and then there's the Punjabi industry. So it's a different language,
right.
A much smaller industry, much shorter history, I believe, of movies.
But still very different from here, obviously.
So that was my first job. I was married by that point, and that was my first feature, and it was 35 days, I think, shooting days. It was about $1 million. They didn't want it to be. They wanted it to be, 8 or 9, but it became $1 million, 8 or 900,000.
Because of your fees.
Definitely not because of my fees. That was kind of awesome, because the weird thing with those is that they all show theatrically around the world. So I was able to go and see all of those movies at the Cineplex Odeon. My parents went to see them in England. So it was really weird because it was kind of small.
Global status.
Yeah, but with this strange global status. Yeah, I mean, they were kind of great. So I did this first one, Mirza, and I wasn't thinking about Indian cinema at all. I was purely thinking about it from...
Advancing your career.
Well, and also just, what I knew was Hollywood style and stuff.
Right.
And I just came to it with that. And it kind of made a bit of a ripple, I guess, because I think the films up to that point weren't particularly good looking. And because of my lighting background, like I remember one of the first, we were shooting on the Watchmen set, which was
Which is still, just as an aside, is still here, right? It's
I
evolved
think so.
on Marine Drive.
Yeah, that's right. That's the one.
Marine Crossing.
Yeah, I
kind
haven't
of
been to it for years.
Well,
but
it was
yeah.
condemned for a while.
Right,
And
because
then
there was actually a fire the day that we were shooting. So this was our first day of the shoot, I believe. No, I think we'd done one day before that. And then so it's big exterior street set. So you've got a couple of city blocks.
It's still called I feel like people still call it the Watchmen set.
Yeah,
and that was one film.
It was like crumbling when we were on it, but it was enough to look at. But we were shooting this night exterior fight scene, and they wanted to shoot it, the director wanted to shoot everything at 120 frames a second, which is quite slow motion. And when you do that, you need a lot of light. There's this exterior street set. Literally, which is like, I think it's a city block long with you've got a couple of streets.
Looks like New York, kind of.
Yeah, and not a single light actually exists there other than what the movie production brings. So all the street lamps, all the shop windows, anything had to be brought in by the production. Now, my grip and electrics crew was 3 people, like a gaffer / Jenny Op and 2 guys. And we had this night exterior to shoot, and I'm still amazed what we did, because there were literally 4 of us, and before we could get into the location, there was a fire. So, and we'd planned the day, like I'd said, it's going to take us 4 hours.
Like from another shoot, or just a random fire.
A random fire, and I'd said, look, there's only three lighting people. It's going to take 4 hours to light, and I'd ordered like a couple of construction cranes for each side and some lights on those, and I knew we had to rig those, and we had to light, we had to bulb the street lights.
I don't think people think about that. They assume it's all just ambient light.
Yeah, but it's like there would not be a shred of light in that place if we'd not put those lights in. And then so on that morning there's a fire, so we'd planned it 4 hours before it was going to be dark. We'd have 4 hours to light in the daylight. It would get dark and we'd shoot. We couldn't get in until it was dark because of this fire. We finally got in, and anyway, sure enough, it took 4 hours. I myself was running up and down the street with lamps and putting them in shop windows, and I'd tell the electrics, I put a light in there, it needs power, anyway, we pulled it off, and it's still some of the stuff I'm the most proud of in some regards. It was like pretty epic, Hollywood style stuff, and I think without a lighting background, I don't think I could have done that.
Yes.
But I knew exactly what we needed. And even these days, I wouldn't be as confident saying that because I don't work in lighting anymore and things have changed so much. But anyway, yeah, that was that was a really great project, and I really got to flex my muscles and do some cool looking stuff. I think, and I haven't done a new show reel forever, and it's still probably the thing that's most prevalent on my existing show reel.
I think I watched it. There's lots of rain, or like,
is
there lots
of...
of...
reel? Watch the reel, then watch the movie. The movie
no, not the
movie. But from that, I ended up winning Best Cinematography at the Punjabi Film Awards, which was kind of strange. No one told me this. I got a phone call from an Indian friend. I just saw you win this thing on TV, and I was like, what? No one told me. And he's like, yeah, some guy went and picked up your award. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even... weird. So I've never seen that award.
You've never seen the award? You don't have it?
And then,
Let's get it.
On the strength of that, I got another Indian movie straight away. This one was all in Canada. And then I got another Indian movie based on that. That one was half in Vancouver and half in India. So we shot for 30-odd days in Vancouver. And then I had to go to India to shoot. And
have you ever been?
I'd never been. The producer also arranged for me to shoot another film straight after that one. In India. So I ended up going to India it was something like, I think it was 48 days.
Did your wife go?
No, and we had just had our first baby.
Oh my goodness. This is all so familiar.
Yeah, so he was like 5 months or something.
I think I still have some PTSD from those days.
Probably. It'll probably never go away.
No.
So I it was out, and so I shot these, the rest of this movie and this whole other movie without a single day off. It was 47 days. They don't take days off in India, and
why would you?
No, I don't know. And
can't get things done when you take a day off, Toby.
Oh God, ridiculous. But in a way, it was good because my family wasn't there, so it was like, yeah, just get it done.
They're probably like, these Canadians are so weak.
Yeah.
They want days off.
Yeah, I know. They were literally.
Well, because I can just imagine how hard people work in India. It's like obscene.
Yeah, and like some of the the lamp pops were getting $7 a day, and they would work like 20 hours. They'd be
Oh
sleeping
my
on set 'cause they had no
God.
choice. It was
No.
like really.
That's when you are happy for unions.
Yeah, and
Right?
I remember getting into arguments with producers because I'd hang out with the lamp pops. They were my guys. Like I was, I had a lot in common anyway, and they were great guys, and so I'd be hanging out with them, and the producer would be like, "You can't talk to those guys because of the whole, class system and everything, and
yeah,
and who gets treated like shit and who doesn't." But I was not having any of that. Anyway, some interesting times, and the biggest difference is that time is not a premium over there. Like here, time is everything. Like all the days are so, rigorously scheduled so that you can get your day and not spend too much money. Whereas their time obviously doesn't cost any money, and so they spend it very differently. But they're able to get immense amount for their budget somehow, like as far as their locations and everything. And so that was interesting. The third film I did, they kind of screwed me over. I didn't get paid. Well, I did eventually get paid, but I had to go on this social media tirade in order to get my last paycheck off them. And so I'd kind of was done with those guys for a while.
So when did you move into kind of all this Hallmark and Lifetime stuff? Because I feel like that was a big leap for you.
Yeah,
and from then, let's kind of wrap it up and get into the. I would love to end on on your high note of Riverdale.
Okay, right. Yeah, so I was doing those movies, and then I was doing other commercials and stuff here, but slightly better ones by that point, and so I was making ends meet with doing that, and then I forget what it was, but it was somebody that I'd shot a short for, who is now a high-powered executive producer making a series for Hallmark. But at the time, I think he's younger than me. He's incredibly talented and smart guy. But I shot a short for him, 4 days. I was paid like $100 a day honorarium. It was great. Again, that's another one I'm quite proud of. And then he got a job. He was like assistant production manager or something, or he was, I forget what he was doing, like he was production manager, I think, on some MOWs. There's like a slate of 7 MOWs,
which is movie of the week,
for a local company called Odyssey, and I think they had a DP lined up for all of them, but something had happened, and they anyway basically this guy, Matt Drake, who many people listening to this may know, he gave my reel to the director and a few other reels, and the director liked my reel, and so that's how I got my first TV movie. And that was 12 days. It was called, what was it called? Text to Kill is what it was called. Text to Kill, about a cyber attacker. And it had Dina Myers from Starship Troopers. I don't know that. Yeah. Which for me was like, oh my God, I've hit the big time. Someone from Starship. I loved Starship Troopers. And that was a whole. I felt like I almost had to start from scratch. In hindsight, and now I know that I didn't really, but coming from doing these 35, 40 odd day. Indian movies where they didn't care about time. Now I had 12 days shooting 9 or 10 pages
of script,
which is
per
lot. Day, which is a lot.
What's an average? 3
well, it
or
depends.
4?
I'd say it depends. But on like the big series like Riverdale and stuff, it tends to be around sort of 5 or 6. Sometimes less, sometimes more, depending.
But that's an average, so.
Yeah, and but obviously the lower the budget, the less days, and the more you got to shoot in the time. And so I was doing. So that led on. I did a string of those really. I did 4 or 5 of those. And then I guess I say like.
Did you have to simplify your approach based on time and
and
also not to slag it, but what it was? It's not a big artistic endeavor. It's about the story. And
it's funny with these movies because I just did. I still do them, and I just did one only this year, like in. I forget when it was, but I think it was this year, 2019, maybe it was last year.
That's this year.
Yeah, it was last year and I did this. But I still try and give them everything. And try as you might, you can't escape what they are, it seems. And I'm sure
it's not an insult. It is what it is.
Yeah.
The way soap operas are what they are.
Yeah, and that's what people want, and the creative producers will make them that. If you're trying to make it artistic, they don't want it. Obviously, I'm always trying to do as much as I can within the realms, but I know what I'm delivering with those things. But like I say, the one last year, I gave it everything. I chose, I own some equipment now, and I wanted to use an 80s one, and I didn't want to use my lenses, so I chose not to rent the lenses and not make that money so I could use older lenses, and just really gave myself to it. But it's still a cheesy Lifetime movie that everyone will slag online, but yeah, I did have to simplify sorry, I'm getting text here. David Dennis. Anyway.
We'll cut that out, don't worry.
Where was I?
Well, I was going to say one thing, too. Like, Tony had worked on supernatural and lighting for so long. And then when he was sort of trying to get into, other stuff, he took some commercials. And I think one was for, like, Hootsuite or something. And it was in a cafe.
Right.
And he's doing all this lighting, and the guy's like, can you just tone it down? Because I think he'd put supernatural onto this thing, so it was like moody and dark and shadows, and the guy's like, it's just a Hootsuite commercial in a cafe, like you don't need, you could just throw up 2 lights and back up. And he was like, oh, you're right. But I think you get in that world of what you're working on, and that's the supernatural lighting was what he had in his mind.
Sure.
But he realized that doesn't fit on everything.
Sure.
You got to know, when to hold and when to fold them, kind of thing.
Definitely, yeah. There's definitely, I think everyone probably has their way of doing things, but that's not to say that the style is always going to be the same, especially when it comes to the mood. You might light faces in the same way, but, the backgrounds and everything and how much contrast can change. And I thought when I started doing those films, I thought they want it bright, they want it quick, and I was like, I've got to do that. And it was really impressed upon me by this producer, like, make your days. There's no overtime. And it's true with those shows, they're so tightly budgeted because there's no money, and it all goes on the trucks and the catering and stuff, that there's literally no money for anything and zero money for overtime. So you had to make your days, and that's that's informed how I work so much. Now, I might go on Riverdale, and they've got all the time in the world, so it seems, and take forever. And I'm like, bang, 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 bang. Okay, let's go, let's shoot.
A little bit of the Indian film and a little bit of those like movie of the week. So this guy's efficient. So let's talk about Riverdale, because we're nearing the end of our time together. But I would love to talk about Riverdale because it's like a darling of Vancouver. I think it's how many seasons now?
I guess it's going into its 4th season. Yeah.
Right. So you're on second unit on Riverdale. So let's describe what second unit is. And I would love to hear how you approach that show, because if you haven't watched it, it's beautifully shot. And I know it's not all you, and you're going to say, look,
it is all me. No, it's not.
But, it is still you. But I love the lighting and the mood on Riverdale. I didn't know it was such a dark show.
Yeah.
Growing up reading Archie comics, Riverdale is not Archie comics.
Sure, I think I think that's the thing. There's the same with Sabrina. Like they're sort of giving it a new spin and
But with that comes that sort of darkness and that moodiness and the deep colors and the ambient lighting, and it's all very dramatic, which is beautiful. I
love. I mean, because I love that stuff far more than a lot. Like the Hallmarks, for example, the kind of the opposite, and it's a different thing. You're going for like this glamour look all the time, and
2 different worlds, really, because Hallmark shoots everything up here. All those Christmas, they're shooting in April with like pretend snow on the streets.
Oh God,
and
don't get me started.
I have friends that have acted in it, and there's tons of Hallmark stuff here.
There is. So
but how did you find Riverdale? How did you how did you fall into that?
I think it was, I don't even know, to be honest. I think the producer, I'd talked with the producer about another show the previous year. I think that was what it was. And I guess that was enough for her to call me. I don't know.
Was it big? Because I know a show can be big, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's,
for me,
big to you for your career.
Yeah, big for me, for sure. Like, because at that point, I'd done a couple of series, but they were lower budget series, and they didn't get renewed for a second season. And so I was still doing a lot of MOWs. That was really what I was paying my rent with. And so getting Riverdale was huge. Now with second units, like historically, a second unit would be like for X-Men, for example. You have Hugh Jackman doing whatever he's doing, and so main unit are shooting that scene with Hugh Jackman, and then 5 cars get thrown out a window and explode. Then main unit shoot all the stuff with Hugh Jackman. And then second unit come in and they shoot all the cars exploding.
Right.
So that historically that's the kind of thing that second unit do. They might pick up inserts, and insert is like a close-up of someone, pressing a button or whatever, and with
Where you don't want to waste time with the main actors.
Exactly, because the main actors cost a lot of money, and you just got to get through all your work, and so you put aside all these things that you can do with a hand double with another unit.
That makes sense. Gotcha.
So typically, second unit would come in and clean up all this stuff, but these days, and certainly with Riverdale, it's not that. You're simply another main unit, only half the size. You're still got. We still had the same page count. We had less time. We had all the main cast. There were full scenes.
Why is that? Just so much to get through?
Because so much to get through, and they weren't being as efficient as I guess had initially been expected.
Right. So it's a nice way to tighten it up.
So which was awesome because it meant I was just shooting scenes. I wasn't, I wasn't going in having to match the lighting for a scene that was already shot. I could just, do what I wanted, obviously within the look of the show.
So how do you go about that as a DP? So you're on the show. It's like you're going to start in a week, let's say. How do you approach that look and feel and lighting? What do you do as a cinematographer to prep for that?
Yeah, well, I had not done second unit before, and so I had that exact question when I got the job. But yeah, and so I was asked to go in for a couple of days to shadow the main unit DP to see how he worked and what he was doing, so I did that. But what I realized ultimately is that I think everyone has their own. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all do the same stuff. Ultimately, what everyone's aiming at isn't often very different. But you have your own techniques of how to achieve it, and you have your quick things that you can do to tweak something, improve something. And I've always been known as, I'll always run in and pan a light quickly and run back to village. So I hate it. Like, the TAD, which is the training assistant director, their job is to basically stand in village next to the DP and announce on Channel 1 everywhere he's going. Toby's turn 1, which is going to the washroom. On Channel 1 to everyone, great. Or Toby's coming in to set. I hate that because I'm just going in to just pan a stand.
Is it because it's sort of it's like big chops coming in?
Yeah, and do we need to halt proceedings? I'm like, no, keep going.
Oh, I see. Like, is it going to be a big discussion about what you want?
Exactly. Am I going to slow shit down or whatever?
Yeah.
Where was I going?
Just how you approach it.
That was it. So I think everyone has their own way of doing things. So like, if we move on to a close up, I might do a quick something to improve it, based, compared to the wide shot. And someone else will do something else. And if you have, so there's always these little problems that emerge. You approach a shot and with a certain, lighting in mind, and you do that. But little problems emerge, and you might need to cut light off a wall.
Well, and on that point, you mentioned Video Village. For people that don't know what that is, like Video Village is not on the set. So you have the set, right, where the actors are and everything's happening. Mm-hmm. And then Video Village is this little world in a tent, blacked out usually like around the corner. Yeah. And that, you're living more in Video Village, right? Just to be clear for people, you're not on set with the director. Right. You are looking through kind of the screen of what it's going to look like on TV.
Yeah, which is...
So you need to see it not with like, I'm standing here, but...
You need to see it...
What's it going to look like on television?
Exactly, and so this is...
16 by 9 or whatever, right?
Yeah, and this is new, like, because, back, even 15 years ago or less, shooting film, for example, there wouldn't have been the Video Village. There's no point, because it's all going to the film stock, and at that point, you'll understand your film stock, your light meter, you trust the camera operators, you see it on a very crappy video feed, which you can't rely on at all. And so previously there wasn't a Video Village, and you might be right there on set, probably would be.
Would you say it's better this way or no?
No, I don't know, because I love operating a camera, and so with all my Indian movies, I was operating the camera, a single camera. I was doing the lighting. Whereas in TV, now the DP doesn't operate the camera.
You have a camera operator.
An A camera operator and a B camera operator.
And then assistants for those cameras.
And assistants for those, yeah. So I'm not ever touching a camera or lens or anything. It? Yeah, loads.
Are you allowed to touch it?
Yep. And you can jump on it
Toby's
if you want.
coming into set to touch the cameras.
But I try to, like I say, with the collaboration, like I try and hire people that I don't have to micromanage and I don't want to, because you get more from people if they're engaged in the process. And as soon as you start micromanaging, and I know this from web
kill
design,
their vibe, right?
You totally kill the vibe, and then they just become what do you want me to do? They're not creatively engaged anymore. They're not giving.
You won't get the best.
Yeah, so I don't want to micromanage and so I'm not someone who'll jump in and be like, get off this dolly and give me this, unless they're terrible.
Unless it's upside down.
Yeah.
That's the standing joke. We'll never let it go.
So video, but nowadays with HD video, what is being piped out of the camera through the cable is the image that you're going to see, and you do want to look at it in a tent so you can judge your contrast properly and everything. But it's annoying because you're in this freaking tent and you're not on set, and so if you want to tweak that light, it's annoying.
It's like the telephone game a bit.
Yeah, it is.
There's a detachment. You literally have to walk over there.
And so for me, people are always saying, "Oh, it's really good that you wear a Comtech," and a Comtech is what you use to monitor the actor's dialogue. And
like headphones?
Like headphones,
okay.
yeah. And then, so you've got a little wireless thing the sound guy gives you and headphones, and you can walk around and hear the dialogue clearly.
Right.
And I do like to do that, so I am engaged in what people are saying, because you can just be looking at images and you're not involved in the scene, and you might be like, it is fine for them to be dark right now, because they're talking about
Do you hear them when they're talking, when it's like cut?
Yeah,
so
yeah, they do. The sound guys try and mute it.
I'm so
you
curious
don't get all
about that. You're getting like their weekend stories.
Well, the other reason I wear a Comtech is because the boom is on set, and I can hear what's going on set, and I can't stand it if the director and the camera operator are talking and I don't know what they're talking about.
You want to know, yeah.
I hate it, and also you finish
FOMO.
a shot and then you gotta. I run in as fast as I can, just so that I'm involved in moving on, because otherwise anyway. So yeah, there's this detachment of a video village,
which I don't think people know. Like when you walk by a set and you see that black tent.
Yeah,
that's probably Video Village.
That's right, and like I say, you have to go back there in order to so you're judging the contrast properly and all that stuff. And the directors will frequently be on set with little monitors. They don't need to see the images clearly, and they're closer to the actors. And I don't like that either. Like, I like to be close to the director so you can talk and conspire and decide what's important and be able to make eye contact.
So that's a bit of a change
during
for you.
A take, and yeah.
Clearly, it's working out though.
Yeah, well, it's the way it is, and I see why it is. I used to say, like, give me one camera and I'll shoot this stuff quicker than not operating two of them. I don't think I quite think that way anymore. There's times when I totally do, and I'm famous for not liking to play B camera.
And what's A and B camera, just for people?
So A camera is obviously the main camera, and ultimately when you shoot a scene, you block a scene, what's called blocking a scene, with the director, which is where you figure out what the actors are going to do, where they're going to go, and where you're going to put the cameras, and whether they're going to move, and which parts of the scene you're going to cover from what angles, and what you need to cover the scene. An A camera is at the front and center of that, and so ultimately you're building your scene ultimately with the A camera, and then B camera you can use it in various different ways. Frequently, what people are using it, they're on a longer lens shooting a close up, while the A camera is doing something a little wider. I don't like that. I like to use the best lens possible in exactly the right spot, and I think you can do that quickly and efficiently and get fantastic results. Whereas this is general TV culture that I'm always fighting against, which is get the two cameras in there. We haven't got time. We've got to don't give a shit if it's a long lens.
TV is frantic. Tony mentioned that, right? Like feature film, you're just bleeding time. You might do one shot for the whole day.
I don't know if I'd love that.
He was a bit lost though. He was just like, this is like once you get on that TV world where you're just giving her the whole time. Film is like a sloth.
Yeah, it's sure, and I think I'd love that. I mean, I'll say it's been a while since I've done that, and I'm so used to like go.
Yeah. So Riverdale, like all those young kids, do you feel old? We're getting up there, you and I. And I started thinking about all of these shows, these young Sabrina, Riverdale, these you're around all these teeny bopper kind of actors. I remember Tony worked on Twilight, and he was like, I feel old.
Yeah.
These kids seem so young, and there's like 100 screaming people on set being held back.
Yeah.
And that's when he's like, I realized I wasn't 19 anymore. You know? Like you are now, you're a father, you have two kids, and you're working on the show of youngsters.
Yeah.
What's that like? What's that vibe? What's the vibe on Riverdale?
I mean, to be honest, the cast are all very, very cool. There's a couple that are less so, but in general, like, the cast are great. I can't say enough about KJ, who plays Archie. He's like the most down-to-earth, awesome guy who's just going to be hanging around, having a laugh with the crew. No ego, great guy. Can't say enough about him. And the same goes for so many of the other cast members. So it's obviously a big cast, a lot of them. So I was initially thinking, God, it's going to be an ego fest, but it kind of wasn't. And here and there it can get that way, and
that may change as the show goes on.
Yeah,
right?
I think it has been, because I haven't worked on it now.
I've heard that trend generally with shows. Season 1, everyone's lovely. Season 5, you see a lot more temper tantrums.
Yeah, because I guess I was on 2.
Because they're like, look, this is successful now. now, and I've had it, and this is what I want.
Yeah.
Right? And they
yeah.
just put their foot down because they've got more confidence.
Yeah, and I've heard from people who've been working on it that that's starting to happen a bit more now.
Yeah. I think it's inevitable,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then the whole Luke Perry thing, that was so sad.
Super sad.
I grew up with him, and
Yeah.
that's when I realized I was old because, you know, he's like 51 or 2 and dies of a stroke, and I'm like, God, he was a heartthrob when I was young.
Yeah,
That
I know.
was a big hit for the city, right?
Yeah, and I'd worked with him a few times before then, and yeah, you know, great guy. I've been working my way through the 90210 cast actually, because I've worked with Jason Priestley is another great guy.
And he's directing a lot now,
Yeah,
right?
he is. I think he's doing that more than acting. Yeah, and Shannon Doherty as well. I work with.
And they're coming back for the whole 90210 revamp, I think.
Great.
Like
right.
a reunion
Yeah,
of sorts,
yeah.
without Luke, sadly.
Yeah, well,
which
that's
is-
I mean,
That's
yeah.
bittersweet for sure.
Yeah, totally. Because Luke was a great guy. Like,
Yeah.
you know, again, you know,
Everyone raved
didn't
about
bring,
him.
Yeah, didn't bring ego to set. It was just an awesome.
And then you just have to keep
guy.
going. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings me to the end of like, you know, family and how hard it is. We kind of touched on it, of being a father, being a husband, and also wanting to kind of keep channeling and moving your career along.
Sure.
Right? Film can take everything if you let it.
Yeah,
know?
and it does. And there's one person I can credit for that, which is my wife. I wouldn't be able to do it without my wife. Like, we've got 2 kids, 4 and 7, and you know, obviously there's a lot of work involved in that. And when I'm working, I'm not there. Like,
No.
I'm gone before they wake up, and I get home after they've gone to bed, 5 days a week. And on the weekends, I'm exhausted, and
Yes.
it's all like, Daddy's home, let's do stuff. It's Saturday, and I'm like, I just want to sit here and do nothing.
It's a toll for sure.
Yeah, and so I genuinely don't know how I would do it without my wife, because you know, she holds that immensely heavy fort together all the time, and
Yes.
And you know, I like you know, once in a while I thought, what would I do? And I can't think of anything. I think I would genuinely have to change my career.
Yes. Well, both people working in film, because she obviously came from a lot of that background too, and it's challenging for you both to be able to carve that out and still have a family. And
Yeah.
so kudos to your lovely wife and all film spouses out there.
Absolutely,
Really,
yeah.
because it takes a village.
It really does. It really does. And like, you know, as I say, you end up just being absent. But then you have these periods like now where I'm with them every day. I'm taking them to school, picking them up.
That's our reality at home too.
Yeah, so it's like
My
all
son's
or
all,
nothing.
Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. I want Daddy to do everything. And I'm like,
Exactly.
that's totally fine. Daddy
Exactly.
can go wipe your bum.
Yeah.
Because Tony used to feel so sad, like he wants you for everything. And I'm like, it's all you now.
Yeah,
Enjoy.
yeah. That's it. Yeah, 'cause
He's
the
calling
novelty.
you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so now you're off to the UK, some family time.
Yeah.
So that's one plus of hiatus.
Yeah.
You know, if you take it for what it's worth, you can have downtime, be able to reset. And
Yeah.
then everything gears back up in the summer. Are you back on? You don't really know what you're doing next.
Don't know. No, there's a few potential irons in the fire, but we'll see
Well,
which one.
You might just get a phone call telling you to show up somewhere at 6:30 a.m.
I might, and I'll take it.
Right? Thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
No worries. Thanks for having
I
me.
really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks. If you want to learn more about my podcast, you can go to vantropolispodcast.com, or you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also leave me a review on iTunes, subscribe, or share it with someone you love or don't love. Just share it.